My last video exposed what most move abroad influencers aren't telling you, the realities behind your privilege as a foreign resident. One thing came through very clearly: moving abroad requires asking harder questions. In this video, I'm walking you through 6 that most people never ask before they go. If you're thinking about moving abroad, these 6 points I'm about to make will help you see past the surface and prepare for life as a new resident. Most Americans move abroad to escape the rat race. We're tired of the 50-hour weeks, the high cost of living, the feeling that we're constantly grinding just to stay in place. We want a slower life. But whose grind is actually paying for your slow life? Because that worker pulling a double shift, they're doing that same hustle that most Americans say they moved away to escape, except they're doing it at a fraction of the pay. And when that kind of gap exists back in the US, we call it a crisis, but when abroad, many call it affordable living.
We can't let the desensitivity seep in. But if it's your problem, then it's not mine. It's a poor people problem.
Being a global citizen isn't about finding the cheapest labor. It's about understanding how wealth and survival are distributed around you. What is the real cost of survival for locals in the country in which you intend to live? Does a stable middle class exist there? If the answer is no, then you're not moving to a vibrant economy, you're moving into a landscape of extreme inequality. And where are you in the pyramid? With a US income, you're not just doing well, you're probably sitting at the top. For the DR, for example, which I broke down in my last video, the minimum wage doesn't cover the minimum cost of living. None of this means, of course, that you shouldn't move abroad. But when you move to a country with a weaker currency than the dollar, then the move comes with responsibilities. So why does this matter to you practically? Because inequality isn't invisible, particularly these days. It affects everyday interactions, and it determines whether you're genuinely part of a community or just living next to one. And if you're the foreigner in a gated community while the neighborhood 10 minutes away is struggling to buy bread in these really costly times, then the gap won't go unnoticed, and over time it will define your experience in that country. In your first year, you might not feel it, but as you build relationships and integrate, and as you start to actually see the people around you, the inequities stop being background noise. They become personal, because now it's your nanny, it's your child's teacher, it's your favorite local business owner, and that changes how you carry yourself in the place that you choose to call home. So you have a choice: continuing the same systemic traps that you fled back home, or you can be a strategic partner. When you hire a gardener, a nanny, don't just look at the going rate, know what it actually costs for a family to get ahead. And if you left the US because you couldn't get ahead, then why would you build a new life that relies on making sure that others can't either? If you want to move from being a resident who extracts value versus one who actually contributes, then you have to stop seeing the local wage as a discount and start seeing it as a tool for stability. Negotiate your rent in the local currency, not in US dollars, because rent is your biggest expense and it is the one that will most impact the areas and the communities around you. Yes, many landlords in foreigner-heavy areas will push back, and negotiating in pesos requires language skills and local knowledge possibly that most arrivals don't have. But you should try, because here's what happens when you don't. That villa or apartment that you're renting, who owns it? Sometimes it's a foreign investor. Sometimes it's a local landlord who realized that they could demand a lot more if they charged in US dollars once they see that foreigners are moving in. In a country where the majority of people earn in pesos, for example, in the DR, a dollar price rental isn't just a currency choice, it's a market signal. It tells every landlord in that area what the ceiling is, and that ceiling then becomes completely out of reach for most locals.
Renta en dólar? ¿Quién que regula eso? Nosotros somos dominicanos. ¿Y esa lo que era?
Over time, dollar pricing becomes a standard. Locals get pushed out of their own neighborhoods because the market adjusted to foreign income. So paying the local currency means your money stays inside the local economy. It means you stop feeding dollar inflation in neighborhoods. It also means you're paying the real price, not the foreigner markup. Now, in a tourism hub like Punta Cana, nearly everything is priced in dollars. That's the market. This advice applies more to cities and towns where local currency economy still exists. And if you can't negotiate in the local currency, then at least understand that your dollar rent is doing damage to the area that you're in. That awareness is the beginning of being a responsible resident, because the question isn't just where your money goes, it's also whether the people who were there before you can still afford to stay.
Pero yo quedo mala, lo que te rentan en dólares no saben hablar inglés.
Have you actually talked to locals or are you only talking to foreigners? I want to tell you about David. I met him while writing my Moon guidebook on the Dominican Republic. I spent a year traveling around the country, slowly talking to people in different provinces. Most American tourists back then had never even heard of Jarabacoa. David knew every inch of the area, every story, every shortcut. But he didn't speak English. He had no digital presence and no website, no booking platform, just a Facebook page. So tourists only found him if they went to that particular hostel in Jarabacoa. I spoke Spanish, so I could talk to him. I wrote about him in my book and I translated his story so that other tourists in the future could find him. Well, a year later, I got a phone call from David and he was beside himself, excited, told me to go online, go to Google and search for Pico Duarte mountain guide. I did. And David showed up as first in the results. My publisher had featured an excerpt from my book online, and it brought him more business than he ever imagined he could have. And every time I went back to Jarabacoa after that, David refused to let me pay for anything, including a bottle of water or even a ride. That moment taught me so much about living abroad, about our responsibilities as privileged residents. Now, here's my question for you. How did I find David? Not through a Facebook group for new residents, not through a relocation forum, not through a move abroad influencers recommendations. I found him because I left that foreigner bubble. I went where most foreigners don't go. I spoke the language and I listened. There are thousands of Davids in every country that's being packaged and sold by the move abroad content machine. People with incredible skills who are invisible to this foreign resident economy because most don't really bother to look for people like David. But David's story also reveals something bigger. It's not just that foreigners stay in their bubble, it's that they arrive with infrastructure that people like David never had. A US bank account that accepts Stripe, a digital profile with years of credibility. You didn't just arrive with more money, you arrive with a head start. And meanwhile, people like David, who know their area like the back of their hand, struggle to get paid by international clients without help. And that isn't a personal failing, it's a structural gap. Most move abroad content never talks about this because it would mean admitting the massive advantage that they come with. The expat bubble is self-sealing. It keeps you comfortable, but it also keeps you blind. Most people who move abroad move from a system where they're citizens with deep-rooted legal protections to a system where they're just guests. Ask yourself, do I know the formal complaint process in that country? Does your visa have conduct clauses? Many residency visas allow the government to revoke your status if you're deemed disruptive to the public order. Residency is a privilege. Are you assuming that your home rules apply? For example, look at relationships in the Dominican Republic. If you're a foreign man and you think you're just dating this Dominican woman, that you won't owe her anything because you're not married, well, think again. If you live together for just 2 years, then that person has become your legal partner who can claim 50% of the assets that you've purchased while in the country. So research the laws that could actually change your life, because I don't know is not a legal defense, not in the US, not anywhere abroad. We all saw the videos from Dubai earlier this month. Thousands of travelers suddenly stranded, including Americans, who realized the US embassy couldn't just get them out right away.
Please do not rely on the U.S. government for assisted departure or evacuation at this time.
The embassy told Americans to shelter in place and they had to find their own way out through a neighboring country until the U.S. government could actually arrange to take them away. In 2026, the predictable times are over. Look how fast the world has moved in the last 60 days. We saw the U.S. military raided and captured Maduro in Venezuela, and what people are calling the Monroe Doctrine 2.0, where the US is treating the Caribbean like the front line of maritime security. When you're a foreigner, you're just the most vulnerable person when there's a crisis. You don't have a vote, and you cannot assume that your government will come to get you right away. So start asking about your resilience. First, energy. The majority of countries rely on imported oil. So when oil prices spike and the government starts scheduling rolling blackouts to conserve energy, your apartment or house could go dark. Ask if the property has solar, and if it doesn't, perhaps you can have it installed. Then there's food and medicine. When shipping lanes get backed up, Non-essential goods vanish first. If the boats stop coming, how does the country or the island that you're on feed itself? Do you have enough stock of the essential medicines that you need, at least 6 months worth? What about the internet? If cables under the sea are targeted or cut, local banking could go dark. Having a Starlink or a similar device, it's becoming a necessity. And remember that cost of living for locals question earlier? That's where it becomes a security question. If the cost of basic survival gets even worse for locals and you're the wealthy foreign resident living in a country that doesn't have a middle class, then that tension becomes real fast. It touches everything from your daily interactions to your long-term safety. And this isn't about fear-mongering. It's about being realistic and being ready and having an actual plan. If you had to exit tomorrow, are you near a land border or do you have to fly? Do you have a bank account in a different jurisdiction so that if one region goes dark, you're able to access your money? Do you have a folder stored where you can access it offline with all of your important information? The countries that are being marketed to you are feeling the global squeeze. Build your life abroad. Encourage it, but build it with your eyes wide open. The last question is the most practical one. Do you have enough money, not just to live abroad, but to leave when things go wrong? Move Abroad content loves to talk about the cost of rent and other expenses, but it rarely talks about the real cost of the crisis. The medical reality. Can you afford a 50 grand air ambulance flight to a top tier hospital if the local system buckles? If you have medevac insurance, do you know the exact gap, what it covers, what it doesn't? Or can you afford a $5,000 one-way plane ticket when everyone is trying to leave at once? The algorithm does not care about your budget. It only cares who can pay the surge price.
Someone tell me why the ticket cost 10,000 dirhams and 22,000 to get back home. What the hell is this?
And if political instability hits, can you afford to leave on 48 hours notice and support yourself in a new country for several months while you figure things out? You need to be honest about your financial floor. And if you think that your government will come and get you for free, that is not how it works. When the US government coordinates an evacuation, you are required to sign a promissory note, meaning that you have to pay back the government for that flight. And if you don't pay it back, they restrict your passports. While the Secretary of State waived those fees this time for the Middle East crises, you can't rely on that happening again. I'm not saying this to scare anyone. I'm saying it because you deserve the facts. And if you don't have a plan for the total cost of displacement, you need to think it through. And if you've bought a car, a house, and you've got to leave all of that behind, would you still be okay with it? Moving abroad is a privilege, but it's a privilege that comes with the responsibility of being self-reliant. If you can't afford the exit, then you're not ready for the entry. I've talked before about the difference between being a consumer or a contributor to a community. But looking at the wage gaps, the cost of living, the way our currency is shifting local markets, this isn't just a nice to do philosophy. If you're going to take up space in a country that isn't yours, you don't get to be a neutral party. Every rent payment, every salary you pay, every interaction that you have is a vote for what that community becomes. So here's what I need you to take from this. Go, but go prepared. Go conscious. Go asking better, tougher questions than the ones that you're being fed online. Pay above the local minimum wage. Negotiate your rent in local currency. Leave the expat bubble. Learn the laws that actually affect you. Have a physical exit plan. Budget for a crisis, not just the lifestyle. And next time a Move Abroad creator tells you life is just cheaper, easier where I am, ask yourself, is it a strategy or is it just a fantasy? And if your answer is, I'm not sure, then you're not ready to move. You're ready to learn. And that is where your journey actually begins. Build a life that can survive reality. Thanks for watching. If this was useful to you and you're ready to look at travel relocation differently, make sure to subscribe to Tourism Lens. I'm not anti-relocation. I'm a reporter who's lived across 3 continents, but I am anti-illusion. If you're with me on that, I'll see you on the next video.